I lied. I lied to my 9-year-old daughter. Week after week of anxiety and panic attacks had pulled me into depression. And I found myself rolled in a ball in a dark bedroom of our home, crying uncontrollably. My daughter very gently came to that doorway, and she asked me, "Dad, are you okay?" And I said, "Okay." And that was a lie. I wasn't okay. I was a mess. I hadn't slept for days and days and days. Barely ate. Lost 20 pounds. Not a good diet plan. I had put myself and my family through so much turmoil. Over the 18 months that led up to that episode, I left a job because of stress, and it was hurting me physically. And then I took my family and we moved and we went to another job, only for me to find the stress again. I learned that maybe it wasn't the job, maybe it was Steve. And now here I was a third time, moving my family. My daughter and I were at our home. My wife and son had moved to the community we're headed to, and I was just wrought with indecision about all this turmoil I'd put my family through, which was the last thing that I wanted to do. I had grown up in a family that was filled with nothing but turmoil and chaos and neglect and abuse. Living through that was the last thing I wanted to put my family through. And here I was, turmoil in my family, and it was taking my breath away. I didn't want to lie to my daughter. I didn't. But sometimes that's what we do. That's what parents do at times when the truth doesn't seem appropriate at the time. Let me test you with this. How many of you have heard this question? "Mommy, what were you and Daddy doing last night?" I know when you responded to that, you absolutely lied. So that's what we do sometimes, again, when the truth at that time doesn't feel appropriate. This is hard for me to share this story. I'm telling you that I have had a battle with anxiety and depression. It's out of character for me. It's not in keeping with the expectations that you have for me or that I have for myself. Here's the way you normally see me. The guy in the white shirt and the tie, speaking, getting his PowerPoint slides lined up just perfectly. I have it all put together. I've spent 30 years building this persona of this professional that's leading organizations and leading groups of people and leading communities, serving in public office. That's how you view me. And to a certain extent, that's how I view myself. Even my family refers to me as the boss of Christmas and Captain Steve and more recently, Boss Baby, because I have it under control. So sharing this with you is very much out of character. But what I want to do with you today is I want to get out of that character. I want to be real with you. I want to do what I call be my Saturday self. Now, I'm not the only one that gets up on a Saturday morning and has a bad hair day like that. And I don't know who took that picture, but I'm going to find out later. So that's what I'm going to do today. I'm going to get real with you. Later, I'm going to ask you, though, to do the same thing. Because this is not about Steve. It's not a Steve thing. It's an all of us thing. It's every one of us. We are being ravaged by a mental health crisis in our own community and in our own nation. Let me show you the numbers. 1 in 5, if you're 18 to 54, 1 in 5 of you right now is facing a mental health challenge. If you're younger, 18 to 34, 31% of you facing a mental health challenge today. 53 million people across the country are faced with a mental health challenge. Interesting statistic, less than half will receive help. That lack of getting help is so costly for us as a culture, as a community, as a business community. It's costing us 12 billion working days absolutely lost. $362 billion a year in direct and indirect costs as a result of our mental health challenges. According to the World Health Organization, we lose $1 trillion a year in economic activity because of our mental health challenges untreated. If that data is not enough for you, remember this headline? Billings ranked number 1 in the U.S. for the prevalence of depression. I read one headline that said, Billings, Montana, the most depressed city in America. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it. That can't be us. It is us. A report that just came out the other day, Riverstone Health, our prevalence of suicide 2 times the national average. Twice as many of us. Now the data and the headlines are important for us to pay attention to. But what I want to share with you today is this is personal. This is absolutely personal for me, and it's likely personal for you in the audience as well. It's our families, it's people in our neighborhood, it's our next door neighbor, it's our coworkers. It's taking place in our classrooms and in our boardrooms. So, what are we going to do about it? Well, I told myself I was going to accept this challenge. Challenge is that we need more leaders in the workplace speaking up about their own mental health. The article from Forbes that provoked me to speak out suggested that it's okay for celebrities to stand up and say, hey, I've battled with depression. Hey, I've had anxiety. That's good. But that, in many cases, is not real. We need real people, real leaders in every walk of our life to stand up in front of each other and say, I battle with anxiety and depression. So, I'm going to finish my story because I think it's incumbent upon me to speak first. Three weeks after the episode in the bedroom, my daughter and I were relocated with my son and my wife, and that was such a blessing. But my symptoms and what I had just gone through did not disappear. I was sitting on the front porch of our rental home, and my wife was leaving to go to work in the morning, and she stopped halfway to the curb and looked back at me and said, Steve, you start a new job in 5 days. You need to get help. And she was absolutely right. She's always right, by the way. Don't tell her. So I'm sitting there thinking what she had just told me, and a name came to mind. Jim. Jim was the county coroner. I wasn't going to call Jim for an advance reservation. Jim was also a physician assistant, and he had provided family practice health care to our family for many, many, many years. And so for me, Jim was a lifeline. I called Jim's office, and within an hour, they snuck me in between a couple of his appointments, and I'm sitting in the exam room waiting for Jim to walk in, and Jim walks in, and his first words were, Steve, are you okay? And I know, based on his training, he knew I wasn't okay. Maybe you have to start with that question. And so I explained to him what I had been going through. And then Jim asked me probably the most important question I have ever received in my life. Steve, have you thought about harming yourself? About taking your own life? I flashed back to the bedroom where I lied with my daughter. I'm okay. I couldn't lie again. I looked at Jim and I said, yes, I have. And if you know me, it was pretty precise and thought out. It was the hardest one word I ever spit out of my mouth. Yes. Within 45 minutes, I was sitting in a psychiatrist's office going through diagnostic and a lot of conversation and trying to figure out exactly what was going on. I remember her telling me, and I love my psychiatrist, telling me, hey, Steve, you have totally rewired the chemicals in your brain. All this anxiousness and panic attacks and depression have thrown those chemicals way off balance for you. We need to settle those down so then we can start to help get at the root cause of where you're at and where you're headed. And that was a blessing for me to hear. But then she said something that kind of shocked me. She said, Steve, the medication I'm going to give you is going to take 6 to 8 weeks before you feel any difference. I don't know if any of the rest of you have been in the place I was, but that was like a life sentence to me. I couldn't make it 8 weeks. No way I wanted to feel like this, but I knew that I started my healing process when I said yes, and I needed to continue. The next morning, my wife took me for a walk, and God bless my wife, she kept me as active as possible. We're walking around in the neighborhood around our rental, and we walk past a garage sale, and we get home, and I looked at my wife, and I said, honey, can I borrow $20? She kind of gave me a look like, Steve, you're a little bit of a financial risk right now. I don't know. I don't know if we can do the $20, but she relinquished. She didn't really say that, but I could see it in her eyes. She gave me the $20, and I ran back to that garage sale, and I bought that mountain bike. I think I negotiated the price. I'm not sure exactly what I paid. Every morning for 8 weeks, and then 8 months, regardless of the weather conditions, I got on that mountain bike. And I rode as fast as I could, 2.5 miles out and 2.5 miles back every single day. Every day. Something magical happened at 8 weeks. I remember it like it was yesterday. Somebody flipped a switch. There was a bit of hope. I participated in my own healing process. Ironically, my 5-mile route, 2.5 miles out, past the state hospital, 2.5 miles back. Every day. Every day. It was an absolute blessing. I started to feel better about myself and better about the potential for healing. But if you've ever gone through this experience, you know that it's a journey. It doesn't instantly stop. If you're suffering with depression, anxiety, it's a process. It takes time. And it's a roller coaster journey. Depression, especially for me, my experience was like I was getting up every day and staring in the mirror and recording all the dumb things about me constantly. And so what that meant for life as I was trying to heal was that everything that went on in my family was amplified through that lens. So every time we had a battle or argument, I looked in that mirror and said, look what you've done, Steve. I can remember this very clearly as well. We had an argument at home. None of the rest of you argue with your spouses, right? But in my experience, I do. And for me, that argument was all about me. It was like, Steve, look what you've caused. Look at the turmoil you've caused in your family. And so I remember storming out the door. I was headed somewhere. I ended up 2 blocks away in the parking lot of a local high school at night. And in that car, I sat and I wept. Trying to play that what-if game, right? Like, what if I'd only done this different? What if I'd have done that? What if I wouldn't have made that decision? My family wouldn't be going through this turmoil. We wouldn't have had the argument tonight. And so I'm sitting in my car weeping and playing that game with myself, and a car pulls up right next to me. There's a mom and a daughter in that car, and the mom rolls down the window to the passenger side, and I roll down my window. And the mom looked at me and said, "Are you okay?" I keep getting that question. And I think I might have been frustrated because I said, "No, I'm not okay. I just had an argument with my wife." And she like cut me off. I couldn't even finish my story. She cut me off and she just said this. She said, "I think you're going to be okay. Could you help us? We're lost." She did. She said, "Now it gets worse. We're lost, and I think we have a flat tire." And so I had to turn the waterworks off, and I got out of the car. Sure enough, they had a flat tire. I spent the next 40 minutes helping this woman and this daughter. I don't even remember their name. I can remember their face, though, fixing their flat tire. Their spare had maybe not enough air, so I followed them to the nearest convenience store, and I put air in the spare tire, and I watched them drive off into the night. I got back in my car, and I drove home. I was hoping to get at least a partially warm reception from my wife. And I did, thank goodness. But what I told my wife is, "Honey, I just learned a very valuable lesson. It's time for me to shift my focus. It's time for me to take my eyes off myself and realize there are people around me, you and the kids, that need my encouragement now, that need me to pay attention to what's going on in their life." So I had to shift my focus. When I was thinking about sharing this story with you as I wrap up, I had to wrestle with a couple of dilemmas. The first dilemma was, as leaders, we are being trained right now to take a back seat. Leaders eat last, right? That's the training. And in many cases, I absolutely consider that to be important. Other voices need to take center stage. Other ideas need to be the first idea that's shared. Leaders should encourage others to step up, take leadership. And that is absolutely true. In this case, when we are being ravaged by a mental health crisis in our community, as leaders, we need to speak first, to let our voice and our encouragement be heard. The other dilemma that I had to wrestle with was, what is this going to cost me? I'm going to get on stage and I'm going to tell the audience that I've suffered with anxiety and depression. So I went to a professional executive coach that I know, that I respect, and I said, "Okay, what is this? Should I share this story? What is it going to cost me if I share this story?" And she looked at me and she said, "So what?" I mean, so what? I said, "What if it hurts my reputation?" She said, "So what again?" And I thought, okay, I know what you're saying. I have gray hair, I'm at the end of my career. It doesn't really matter now. I can do or say whatever I want. You know, older people do that sometimes. But that's not what she meant. What she meant was, "Steve, you have to speak up. Other people need to know your story, and they need to know that there's hope for them too. You can't be silent about that." And that's what I'm encouraging you today as leaders. We can't be silent about this. So I'm going to leave you with 3 things to do. Where do you start? Start with your yes. It's the same place that I started. If we don't say yes to the crisis we're faced and acknowledge that, we'll never get to a solution. So start with yes. The word yes saved my life. And then secondly, I want you to become an active participant in our healing, your personal healing, the healing of the people around you, the healing of our community and our country. Be an active participant. For me, it was jumping on a mountain bike every morning at 5 o'clock and riding first for everything I could. I got that out of the garage the other day, and my wife said, "Oh, that's the bike that saved your life." I was an active participant. Become an active participant. And then we need to shift our focus. Shift our focus off ourselves and lift our eyes up and see the people around us. Know what they're experiencing. Know what they're going through. Be a resource and a support for them. As leaders, we need to speak first. I don't ever want to go back to where I was with deep depression and anxiety. I don't wish that ever to happen. I beg God to take that away from me, because it hurt me and it hurt my family, and it was just a difficult place for me. But I wouldn't undo it either. I learned a lot about myself. I learned a lot about how I had carried the junk from a childhood that put me in a position of always trying to achieve and be perfect at everything. And I learned what a waste of time and energy that is. I also learned that my experience puts me in a position where I might be able to encourage and help others. And I hope I've done that with you today. Leaders, please speak first. My daughter will see this video, and I want to say to her today, my daughter, by the way, is a licensed mental health therapist. Imagine that. But what I want to say to her is, Allie, Daddy's doing well. And that's the truth. Thank you. God bless.